What happens when a pop icon and a late-night host go from playful banter to a full-blown confrontation that ends with security being called? Tonight, we're breaking down the jaw-dropping interview that had Gwen Stefani storming off the Tonight Show set, leaving Jimmy Fallon speechless and the audience in complete shock. Before we get into it, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us whose side you're on in this clash, because trust me, you're going to have opinions. Now let's dive in. The interview started innocently enough. Gwen Stefani walked out to thunderous applause, looking effortlessly cool in a black leather jacket and those signature red lips. Jimmy greeted her with his usual enthusiasm. That big smile plastered across his face as the band played her out. They hugged. She waved to the crowd and took her seat on that familiar couch. Everything seemed normal. Perfect, even. "Gwen Stefani, welcome back to the show," Jimmy said, his voice carrying that trademark energy. "It's been too long. You look incredible as always." "Thanks for having me, Jimmy," Gwen replied, crossing her legs and settling into the couch. "It's good to be back." "So, let's talk about the new music," Jimmy started, leaning forward with interest. "You've been teasing this album for months now, and fans are going crazy. What can you tell us about it?" Gwen's face lit up. "Well, it's been a really personal project for me. I've poured a lot of myself into these songs. It's different from anything I've done before. More raw, more honest. I think people are going to connect with it on a deeper level." "That's amazing," Jimmy nodded enthusiastically. "And I heard you worked with some interesting producers on this one. Can you give us any names?" "I'd rather let the music speak for itself when it drops," Gwen said with a slight smile. "But yes, I collaborated with some incredible talent. People who really understood the vision." Jimmy chuckled, always keeping us in suspense. Classic Gwen. He shuffled his cards. "Now, I have to ask because everyone's been talking about it online. There's been some buzz about your tour venues. Some fans were disappointed about certain cities not being included in the lineup. What's your response to that?" Gwen's smile faltered just a fraction. "Well, touring is complicated. You can't be everywhere at once. We tried to hit as many markets as possible, but logistics, venue availability, all of that plays a role." Sure, Jimmy said, nodding. "But some people felt like maybe the selection was a bit, exclusive. Like you were only focusing on the biggest markets." There was a pause. Gwen tilted her head slightly. "I wouldn't say exclusive. We made the decisions that made the most sense for the tour. It's not about excluding anyone, right? But when you're charging premium prices for tickets and only playing in major cities, it does kind of feel like you're catering to a specific demographic, doesn't it?" Jimmy's tone was still light, but there was something underneath it now. Gwen's posture shifted. "Jimmy, I think that's a bit of an unfair characterization. Artists have to make choices about where they perform. It's not personal." "I'm just saying what people online are saying," Jimmy replied, holding up his hands in a defensive gesture. "You know how Twitter gets." "Maybe we should focus on the music instead of Twitter drama," Gwen suggested, her voice maintaining its composure, but with a slight edge. Of course," Jimmy agreed quickly. "Speaking of drama, though, I saw you had some interesting comments about the music industry recently. You talked about authenticity and how some artists today are more focused on image than substance. That stirred up quite a conversation." "I stand by what I said," Gwen responded firmly. "The industry has changed. When I started, it was about the craft, about the music itself. Now, sometimes it feels like it's all about the algorithm, the viral moment, the aesthetic. I think that's worth talking about." Jimmy leaned back. "But isn't that a little, judgmental? I mean, who's to say what's authentic and what's not? Maybe younger artists are just expressing themselves differently than your generation did." The word generation hung in the air. Gwen's eyes narrowed slightly. "I don't think it's about generation, Jimmy. It's about integrity. But you've been in the game for 30 years now? Things change. Maybe what you see as lack of authenticity is just evolution." Jimmy's smile was still there, but it felt forced now. "Evolution is one thing," Gwen said, her voice cooling. "Watering down art for clicks is another." "That sounds pretty dismissive of an entire generation of artists," Jimmy pressed. "I mean, aren't you kind of gatekeeping what counts as real music?" "Gatekeeping?" Gwen repeated, her eyebrows raising. "I'm expressing an opinion based on decades of experience. That's not gatekeeping. That's observation. An observation that basically says, new artists aren't as good as you and your peers were," Jimmy countered. The playful tone was gone now. "Some might call that bitter." The audience got quiet. You could feel the energy in the room shift. Gwen uncrossed her legs and leaned forward. Bitter? You think I'm bitter? I'm just pointing out how it might come across, Jimmy said, suddenly backtracking a bit. Look, I'm playing devil's advocate here. No, you're putting words in my mouth, Gwen shot back. I never said new artists aren't good. I said the industry has changed its priorities. There's a difference. But you implied it, Jimmy insisted. When you talk about authenticity like it's something only your generation has. What else are people supposed to think? Jimmy, I don't know what your angle is here, but this isn't a debate, Gwen said, her voice rising slightly. You invited me on your show to talk about my album, not to defend myself against some twisted interpretation of my words. I invited you to have a conversation, Jimmy replied, his own tone sharpening. And part of that conversation is addressing what you put out there publicly. You can't make controversial statements and then act surprised when people want to discuss them. Controversial? Gwen laughed, but there was no humor in it. Having an opinion about music is controversial? Now, when that opinion dismisses an entire wave of artists, yeah, it kind of is, Jimmy said. The audience was completely silent now, watching this unfold. Look, I respect your legacy, Gwen. Nobody's questioning that. But maybe, just maybe you need to consider that your perspective isn't the only valid one. Gwen stared at him for a long moment. You know what, Jimmy? I came here in good faith. I thought we were going to have a fun interview, talk about music, share some laughs. But instead you've turned this into some kind of interrogation where you're trying to paint me as some out of touch has-been who's bitter about new talent. And frankly, I'm not interested in participating in that. Nobody's calling you a has-band, Jimmy said quickly, realizing perhaps that he'd pushed too far. That's not what I meant at all. Then what did you mean? Gwen demanded. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you had an agenda coming into this interview. Like you wanted to provoke me. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jimmy shifted in his seat, his smile completely gone now. I'm doing my job, Gwen. I'm asking questions that my audience wants answers to. Gwen scoffed. Or you. Because it seems pretty personal, Jimmy. And that's where things really started to unravel. Personal? Jimmy repeated, his jaw tightening. What are you talking about? Come on, Jimmy, Gwen said, her voice steady but sharp. You've been taking shots at me since I sat down. The tour venues, the authenticity comments, calling me judgmental. This isn't an interview. This is you trying to make me look bad. That's ridiculous, Jimmy fired back. I'm asking legitimate questions about things you've said publicly. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't say them. The audience gasped. A few nervous laughs broke out, but mostly there was just stunned silence. Gwen's face went from surprise to angry in an instant. Excuse me. Look, I'm sorry if you feel attacked, Jimmy said, though his tone didn't sound particularly apologetic. But you're a public figure. You put yourself out there. You don't get to cherry-pick what gets discussed. I'm not cherry-picking anything, Gwen snapped. I'm calling out the fact that you're being hostile for no reason. What's your problem with me, Jimmy? I don't have a problem with you, Jimmy insisted, his voice rising. I have a problem with the double standard. You get to criticize everyone else, the industry, other artists, but the second someone questions you, you can't take it. Questioning me is fine, Gwen said, her eyes flashing. But that's not what you're doing. You're twisting my words, putting me on the defensive, and acting like I'm some villain. For what? Ratings. Oh, here we go, Jimmy muttered, rolling his eyes. Everything's about ratings, right? God forbid I actually challenge a guest instead of just laughing at their stories and playing games. Challenge me all you want, Gwen said, her voice getting louder. But do it honestly. Don't misrepresent what I said to create drama. That's cheap, Jimmy. That's beneath you. Or at least I thought it was. Jimmy leaned forward, his face flushed. You know what? Maybe I am creating drama. Maybe that's because you came on this show with nothing interesting to say except vague statements about your album and complaints about how the music industry isn't what it used to be. Maybe I'm trying to make this interview actually worth watching. The audience was dead silent now. You could hear people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Gwen stared at Jimmy like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Wow. Okay, so now my album isn't interesting. That's what this is about. I didn't say that, Jimmy backtracked. But the damage was done. Yes, you did, Gwen said firmly. You literally just said, I have nothing interesting to say. So let me ask you something, Jimmy. If I'm so boring, why did you book me? Why waste your time and mine? That's not what I meant, Jimmy said, running his hand through his hair. You're twisting my words now. No, I'm repeating them back to you. And you don't like how they sound, do you? Doesn't feel great, does it? Jimmy's face darkened. This is getting ridiculous. Can we just move on? Move on to what? Gwen challenged. More loaded questions. More attempts to make me look out of touch. I don't think so. Then what do you want to talk about? Jimmy asked, frustration bleeding through every word. Because clearly everything I bring up is wrong. I wanted to talk about my music, Gwen said, her voice controlled but fierce. The thing you just said wasn't interesting. I wanted to talk about the creative process, the messages and the songs, what this album means to me, but you weren't interested in any of that. You wanted conflict. I wanted honesty, Jimmy countered. I wanted you to actually engage instead of giving me rehearsed responses and media-trained answers. But apparently that's too much to ask. Rehearsed responses? Gwen's voice went up an octave. Are you kidding me right now? I've been nothing but genuine since I sat down. You're the one who came in with an agenda. What agenda? Jimmy demanded. What possible agenda could I have? I don't know, Jimmy, Gwen said, throwing her hands up. You tell me. Did I turn down your show one too many times? Did I say something in another interview that offended you? What is this really about? It's not about anything, Jimmy said, his voice tight. You're being paranoid. Paranoid, Gwen repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. You've spent the last 15 minutes attacking me, and I'm paranoid for thinking something's off. I haven't been attacking you, Jimmy protested. I've been doing my job. Your job is to make your guests feel ambushed, Gwen shot back. Your job is to mischaracterize their statements and then act like they're being difficult when they push back. My job is to have interesting conversations, Jimmy said. Not to sit here and blow smoke up your ass for 20 minutes. The audience gasped again. This was getting ugly. Gwen's mouth dropped open. Blow smoke up are you serious right now? I'm being honest, Jimmy said defiantly. Isn't that what you wanted? Honesty? Authenticity? Don't use my words against me, Gwen warned, her voice dangerous now. And don't act like being rude is the same thing as being honest. There's a difference. Maybe in your world, Jimmy muttered. What did you just say? Gwen demanded. Nothing, Jimmy said quickly. Look, can we just finish this interview? Oh, now you want to finish it, Gwen said incredulously. Now that you've gotten what you wanted, now that you've created your viral moment. That's not what. This is Jimmy insisted, but his eyes darted to the cameras. Isn't it though? Gwen pressed. Come on, Jimmy. Be honest with me. That's what you want, right? Honesty. You wanted a moment. Something people would talk about. Something that would trend on social media. Well, congratulations. You got it. You're being dramatic, Jimmy said dismissively. This is just a conversation that got a little heated. It happens. No. What happens is hosts treat their guests with respect, Gwen said, standing up from the couch. What happens is people have disagreements without it turning into a character assassination. But clearly that's not how you operate. Sit down, Jimmy said, his voice hard. We're not done here. Yes, we are, Gwen said firmly. I'm done. This interview is over. You can't just walk off my show, Jimmy said, standing up as well. That's not how this works. Watch me, Gwen replied, already moving toward the edge of the set. Gwen, come on, Jimmy called after her, his voice a mix of anger and panic. Don't be like this. She stopped and turned around, her eyes blazing. Don't be like what? Don't stand up for myself? Don't refuse to be disrespected on national television? Which one, Jimmy? You're overreacting, Jimmy said, desperation creeping into his voice now. Just sit back down and we'll finish the interview like professionals. Professionals? Gwen laughed bitterly. You want to talk about professionalism after everything you just said to me? After you called my album boring and accused me of being bitter and out of touch. I apologized for that, Jimmy said, though he hadn't really. No, you didn't, Gwen corrected. You backtracked. There's a difference. A real apology would mean you actually felt bad about what you said, but you don't. You meant every word. The band members were frozen, watching this unfold. The audience didn't know whether to clap or stay silent. Jimmy's producer was frantically gesturing from offstage, trying to figure out how to salvage this disaster. But there was no salvaging it. This train had already derailed. Fine, Jimmy said, his voice cold. Now if you want to leave, leave. But just know that walking off this show makes you look petty and unprofessional. Not me. Gwen turned to face him fully. You really think that's how this is going to look? You really think people are going to watch this and think I'm the problem? I think they're going to see someone who couldn't handle a tough interview, Jimmy said. Someone who talks a big game about authenticity, but can't take a little criticism. Gwen's voice rose. Jimmy, you weren't criticizing me. You were trying to humiliate me. And the fact that you can't even see the difference is exactly why I'm leaving. Then go, Jimmy said, waving his hand dismissively. Nobody's stopping you. You're right, Gwen agreed. Nobody is. She unclipped her microphone and handed it to a stunned stagehand. Gwen, wait, Jimmy called out, his voice shifting to something almost pleading. But Gwen was already walking toward the exit. You're really going to do this? You're really going to walk out in the middle of taping? She paused at the edge of the stage, turning back one more time. I'm not doing this, Jimmy. You did this. You made this interview hostile from the start. You wanted confrontation and you got it. But I don't have to stand here and take it. So that's it, Jimmy said, spreading his arms wide. One disagreement and you just bail. That's mature. Gwen's voice echoed through the studio. Are you really going to pretend that's all this was? You've spent this entire interview trying to tear me down. You questioned my motives, my integrity, my relevance. And when I called you out on it, you doubled down. So yeah, Jimmy, that's it. I'm done. Jimmy's face was red now, whether from embarrassment or anger, it was hard to tell. You know what your problem is, Gwen? You can't handle not being worshipped. You come on these shows expecting everyone to kiss your feet and tell you how amazing you are. But the second someone treats you like a regular person, someone who can be questioned and challenged, you fall apart. The audience was completely silent, watching in horror as this spiraled further out of control. Gwen walked back toward the center of the stage, her heels clicking against the floor. You want to know what my problem is? My problem is that I agreed to come on your show to promote my music, to connect with fans, to have a good time, and instead I walked into an ambush. You turned what should have been a fun interview into a hit piece. And then you have the audacity to blame me for not just sitting there and taking it. It wasn't an ambush, Jimmy protested. I asked you about things you've said publicly. That's fair game. The way you asked wasn't fair, Gwen countered. You framed everything in the worst possible light. You weren't seeking understanding or clarification. You were looking for ammunition. And when I defended myself, you acted like I was the one being unreasonable. Because you are being unreasonable, Jimmy said, his voice rising again. You're making this into something it's not. I asked you some tough questions. Big deal. If you can dish it out, you should be able to take it. I can take tough questions, Gwen said firmly. What I won't take is being disrespected. And that's what this has been. Complete disrespect. Then why are you still here? Jimmy challenged. If you're so done, why are you still standing on my stage arguing with me? You know what? You're right, Gwen said, her voice suddenly calm. I don't know why I'm still here. I don't know why I'm wasting my energy trying to get through to someone who clearly doesn't care. So I'm leaving for real this time. She turned to go again. But Jimmy wasn't done. Just remember, when this airs and people see you storming off, when they see you refusing to answer questions and making a scene, that's on you, not me. Gwen stopped cold. She slowly turned back around, and there was something different in her eyes now. Not anger, but something colder. More resolute. Let me tell you something, Jimmy. When this airs, people are going to see exactly what happened here. They're going to see a host who is needlessly aggressive with his guest. They're going to see someone who turned an interview into an interrogation. And they're going to see a woman who refused to be bullied on television. So, yeah, let's let them decide who's in the wrong here. I'm not the one who looks like a diva right now, Jimmy shot back. No, you look like something worse, Gwen said quietly. You look like someone who forgot what made you likable in the first place. You used to be the guy who made people feel good, who made them laugh, who made them feel welcome. But tonight, you're just another talk show host trying to score points at someone else's expense. And honestly, that's sad. Jimmy's face twitched. Don't lecture me about my show. I'm not lecturing you, Gwen said. I'm being honest since that's apparently what you value so much. You wanted authenticity. There it is. This interview has been a disaster, and it's because you chose to make it one. You had a choice in how to handle this conversation, and you chose poorly. Get off my stage, Jimmy said, his voice low and dangerous now. With pleasure, Gwen replied. But just so we're clear, I'm not leaving because you told me to. I'm leaving because I have too much self-respect to stay somewhere I'm not valued. Oh, give me a break with the self-respect speech, Jimmy said, rolling his eyes. You're leaving because you can't handle the heat. No, Jimmy, Gwen said, her voice steely. I'm leaving because I refuse to let you turn me into entertainment at my own expense. There's a difference between heat and hostility. And you crossed that line a long time ago. Then go, Jimmy said, pointing toward the exit. Nobody's stopping you. The door's right there. You really want me to leave, don't you? Gwen observed. Even though it's going to make you look terrible. Even though your producers are probably losing their minds right now trying to figure out how to spin this. You'd rather have me walk out than admit you were wrong. I wasn't wrong, Jimmy insisted stubbornly. Of course not, Gwen said with a bitter smile. You're never wrong, are you? It's always someone else's fault. Always someone else being too sensitive, too difficult, too dramatic. Never you. Are you done psychoanalyzing me? Jimmy asked sarcastically. Yeah, I'm done, Gwen said. I'm done with all of this. She looked out at the audience who had been silent witnesses to this entire meltdown. I'm sorry you all had to see this. This isn't what I wanted. I came here excited to talk about my music, to share something I've been working really hard on, and instead you got to watch this train wreck. I'm genuinely sorry for that. Some people in the audience started clapping. Tentative at first, then growing louder. Jimmy's face darkened even more. Don't apologize to them. You're the one who made this a train wreck, right? Gwen said, nodding slowly. Of course, it's all my fault. Nothing to do with you at all. Mock me all you want, Jimmy said, but when this is over, I'm still going to have my show. You're just going to be the artist who couldn't handle an interview. And you'll be the host who drove away a guest, Gwen countered. But sure, let's see how that plays out for you. There was a commotion off stage. A producer had stepped into view, trying to get Jimmy's attention, probably begging him to cut to commercial or do something. Anything to stop this disaster. But Jimmy waved him off. He was committed now, fully invested in this confrontation. You can't just walk off a live taping, Jimmy said, though his voice had lost some of its conviction. This is taped, Gwen corrected. And yes, I can walk off. Watch me, security, Jimmy called out suddenly. Can we get security, please? The audience gasped collectively. Security? Are you serious right now? You're calling security on me. You're disrupting my show, Jimmy said, though even he seemed to realize how bad this looked. I'm leaving your show, Gwen said incredulously. How is that disrupting anything? I'm literally trying to exit. You're making a scene, Jimmy said. No, Jimmy. You're making a scene. You're the one who called security. You're the one who's escalating this beyond anything it needed to be. I was walking away. You could have just let me go. But you can't help yourself, can you? You have to have the last word. You have to be in control. 2 security guards appeared at the edge of the stage, looking extremely uncomfortable. They clearly didn't want to be part of this. Nobody did. This was a mess and everyone knew it. Escort her out, Jimmy said to the guards. That won't be necessary, Gwen said, holding up her hand. She looked at the security guards with something like sympathy. I'm leaving on my own. You don't need to touch me. Then leave, Jimmy said, his voice hard. I am, Gwen said. She looked at him one last time. You know, Jimmy, I used to respect you. I used to think you were one of the good ones. But after tonight, after seeing how you treat people when the cameras are rolling, I don't know what to think anymore. Maybe this is who you really are. Maybe the nice guy act was just that, an act. Either way, I hope it was worth it. With that, she turned and walked off the stage, her head held high, while the audience sat in stunned silence. Jimmy stood there watching her go, his face a mixture of anger and something else. Maybe regret. Maybe just shock at what had just happened. The band didn't play. Nobody moved. It was like the entire studio was holding its breath. And that was it. Gwen Stefani walked off the Tonight Show set, escorted by security she didn't need. After one of the most explosive interviews in late-night history, the whole thing had imploded in spectacular fashion, broadcast for everyone to see. 2 professionals who should have been able to navigate a simple interview had instead created a moment that would be talked about for years. So, what do you think? Was Gwen right to walk off, or should she have stayed and finished the interview? Was Jimmy out of line, or was he just doing his job? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more stories like this. See you in the next one.